know people that like cars, a common sentiment among them is that cars now are just not fun. We need to bring fun back into the auto industry. But it seems like people have really forgotten what makes a fun car fun. A great example of a fun car, and a fun car that a lot of people think about really often, is the Toyota Yaris. So what made the Yaris a fun car? Was it the horsepower? Well, it only had 106 horsepower, that's not a lot. Maybe it was really fast. Well, with a 9.5 second 0 to 60 for the automatic and an 8.5 second for the manual 0 to 60 time, that's not really quick. Maybe it was some functionality, maybe the miles per gallon. 34.39 for the manual and 29.35 for the automatic isn't bad, but is that really what made it fun? No, it's the experience that you have while driving the car. The car was light, the car was easy to maneuver, you felt a connection with your car. If I asked someone if they'd rather have a used 2007 Toyota Camry LE or a brand new Kia K4, just base model, basic car, a lot of them would pick the Camry. Now that's not because the Kia K4 is worse, or they think that the Camry's better, or they want that good old-fashioned Japanese reliability. It's because they want a car they can have a connection with. Now, when I say relationship, I don't mean some weird sort of perverted, deviant relationship with your automobile. A good example of this, which a lot of Gen Zers and millennials can relate to, is growing up with a family minivan. The connection you have to that car isn't physical. It's not some sort of weird emotional relationship. It's just a mutual understanding. It's like you feel where home is. At the end of practice or whatever you were doing, at the end of a birthday party, you got in the van, you smelled the way that the van smelled, you sat down, you laid down, you slept in that car, you rested in that car. That car didn't really mean a whole lot to you back then, but a lot of people liked that connection. They missed that connection, Not your perfect, shiny new Kia, what do they call them, Carnival, not that. Just your average minivan, could probably use a wash, maybe an oil change. Is it going to get either of those? Probably not. But it's always going to be there for you. Your parents always know that it's just one thing they don't have to worry about. They can turn that key, the alternator will start up the engine, and they can drive their kids to school safely without interruption. That's just the relationship that you have with your car, and that's a relationship that a lot of people seek. That's what makes cars like the Toyota Yaris fun, and newer cars feel soulless. The connection, the mutual understanding just isn't there. When I see this car, I can kind of understand where it's coming from. It's just a cheap beater, and all it wants to do is get me from point A to point B. It's going to be there when it can, when I need it to be, and that's what makes the car fun, right? It's easy to drive, it's nice, it's small. You feel with the machine. You're one with the machine. You're just having fun together, completing the overall objective, and understanding that, this thing is a machine, but it is there for me, and I appreciate that quality of it. So now that we understand that feeling of fun, let's get to how we can bring it back to the auto industry. If we want to bring fun back into the auto industry, there's one class of car that we need to bring back desperately. The crossover, but not the way that you're thinking. We already have the Toyota RAV4, we already have the Honda CR-V, and the HR-V and the CHR, cars that we would traditionally consider as crossovers. I mean specifically these crossovers, and there's no better example of the genre of cars and what I want to discuss today than these specific three automobiles. So without further ado, let's get into a brief history of all three of them. As it is the car of the month for December 2025, let's start with the Subaru Crosstrek. Here are the trim levels and the different options and specs that you would associate with them. Now, the Subaru Crosstrek got its start as the Subaru Outback Impreza Sport, as a trim level of the Subaru Impreza in 1993. All Subaru XV Crosstreks have only ever been offered with all-wheel drive, so you can never have to worry about that if you're planning on purchasing one. The Subaru Crosstrek is one of Subaru's best-selling models and is still being sold today. The Suzuki SX4 only had one generation, and here in the United States it began sales in 2006. Suzuki then declared bankruptcy in late 2012, but continued selling the model until early 2013. Sedan and Sportback models were also sold alongside the plain SX4, and it also had standard all-wheel drive, a feature that now we associate mainly with Subaru vehicles. The Toyota Corolla Matrix started off its life in 2003 as a joint venture between Toyota and Pontiac. The Pontiac was called the Vibe, and the Toyota was of course called the Toyota Corolla Matrix. It would later be facelifted in 2005. Then, in 2009, General Motors formally declared bankruptcy and killed off Pontiac in 2010, taking the Vibe down with it. Toyota liked the Corolla Matrix so much that they decided to renew it for a second generation in 2010. But buyers felt that the first generation Toyota Corolla Matrix was way more edgy than the second generation and wanted a facelift. Toyota saw the sales declining, so they decided to SUV-ify at least a little bit the second-generation Toyota Corolla Matrix to hopefully increase sales in 2011, just 1 year and some months and change after they first created the second gen. Production was later ceased in 2013 due to poor sales. And for those of you looking to purchasing any of them or just are curious, here is a spec sheet for all three cars compared with each other. The base Toyota Corolla Matrix had the most trim levels, therefore the base had the worst engine out of all of them, but the higher trim levels had the best engine. Instead of having standard all-wheel drive like the rest of the models, it had optional all-wheel drive, with front-wheel drive being amazingly more common than the all-wheel drive. They all tow the exact same amount, and they all get around the same miles per gallon, with the Subaru XV Crosstrek taking the edge over both of them just by a little bit though. Now that we've done a medium brief history of all the cars, let's get into the connection that they all have with each other. The thing that makes this show the show. Now, if we're looking at the cars alone, there's plenty of simple base-level connections we can make. They're all Japanese, they're all crossovers, they all could be optioned with all-wheel drive or had it as standard. In fact, the Corolla Matrix and the SX4 are actually both red, so that's a connection right there. But what they really represent is the car company's last hurrah for fun cars, or at least attempting fun cars. None of these cars exist in this form now today. The Toyota Corolla Matrix got canceled off and replaced by the Toyota Corolla IM, which is just a Toyota Corolla hatchback, no all-wheel drive, nothing interesting. The Subaru Crosstrek, after being updated in 2018, they made it so heavy that it added an entire second onto the 0 to 60 time. And the Suzuki SX4 cannot be brought back into the United States market because Suzuki exited the entire United States market, so I couldn't buy that brand new even if I wanted to. We've heard of and seen problems before, most famously the trolley problem, most famous for just being a problem. But at the time of all of these cars' intersection, at around 2012 to 2013, the car industry was having a different kind of problem. The crossover problem. People like these new SUV things, they think. They didn't really know why people like them. The Lexus RX shut off in sales, meaning that people wanted, SUVs that were very, luxurious and new and nice and luxurious, and that's what people wanted out of a crossover. But then the Toyota RAV4 exploded in popularity, which proved that people wanted crossovers which were very cheap and fun and light. And then the Subaru Impreza Outback Sport popped off, and that meant that people wanted hatchbacks with all-wheel drive, they think. Every single one of these cars represents a different attempt that their car company had at solving this problem. The people over at Toyota figured, oh, well, these millennials, they probably just want space. So they created a Toyota Corolla. They gave it some sporty trim levels. They made it look aggressive. They partnered with Pontiac so that Pontiac could have the vibe. And they gave it all-wheel drive and some options. You could have all-wheel drive and Explorer if you wanted. You could just have your cheap base Corolla with a hatchback. And you got a little bit of extra room. That was their answer. Suzuki said that people just wanted to be able to go places. They wanted pure functionality and price. So they came out with the SX4 in multiple different versions. But the one that we're focusing on today, just the pure SX4, was adventurous, off-roady, all-wheel drive as standard. That way you could get the features that you wanted without having to worry about trim levels so much. It was an extremely simple car. It had very few trim levels, very few options. It was an all-around Explorer Tourer SUV with fantastic crossover with fantastic field of view, very large windows, very small door frames, and a very SUV-ish outside. Subaru tried the exact same thing. Now, you may not know this, but they actually tried both Toyota and Suzuki's hypotheses before most of them even came up with it. They said, you want to know, people like the Subaru Outback Impreza Sport, right? They like that. But they couldn't figure out why. They couldn't figure out, what about it made people gravitate towards it. Was it the all-wheel drive adventureness? Was it the space, the illusion of, this go-anywhere comfortable vehicle? So they released two cars out with the third-generation Subaru Impreza. One of these, the Subaru Impreza XV, that black one there in the left corner, to be, it's more space, right? You get more viewing angle. It's got all-wheel drive. It can hold your crap. That's how it was marketed. And then the Subaru Outback Impreza Sport, which is go anywhere. Oh, yeah, you can do whatever you want. And we have articles of the time that prove that the original Subaru XV Crosstrek was originally supposed to be called the Subaru Impreza XV is coming to the United States. They thought it was going to be called the Subaru Impreza XV. So which one was right? Well, the Subaru XV Crosstrek tells us Both of them a little bit. I would say mainly the appeal of the sporty go-anywhere was really what helped the Subaru Crosstrek sell. But what helped people want to keep it and keep buying was the versatility of it. So in aspect, you could make the argument that it was just the Subaru Impreza Outback Sport that inspired the Impreza, that inspired the XV Crosstrek, and that the Subaru Impreza XV was just some weird relic in history that we should ignore. But I would argue that the Subaru Impreza XV was crucial. It proved that these cars not only needed to be adventurous and go anywhere and have nice trunk space and look versatile, but they also needed to be all of those things at the same time. There was also a third hypothesis, aside from the spaciousness and, adventurousness, was the sportiness. That's how we got the Subaru Impreza WRX STI hatchback, one of the only hatchback STIs ever made, ever from Subaru. It was the third generation. The Suzuki SX4 Sportback and the Toyota Corolla Matrix XRS. This was also proven to be distrue. Now you may say, well, the WRX STI is still around. Yes, but it's not a hatchback. They haven't sold it in hatchback since the end of the third generation in 2011. The Suzuki isn't made anymore, so I think we can say that that's safe enough to say that that hypothesis got thrown out. It did stay the longest out of all these, though. And then the Toyota Corolla Matrix XRS didn't carry over to other models, died, and then they came out with GR. But the brilliance to all of this is that the dates line up. Just think about it. In 2006, Suzuki came out with their idea of what people wanted, the SX4. Also during 2006, Subaru and the third generation Subaru Impreza came up with those three models. The WRX, the STI, I keep forgetting this, the Subaru Impreza XV, and the Subaru Impreza Outback Sport. Also around this time, Toyota came out with the Matrix and updated it for the, second generation and the facelift in 2005. Then we finally have our final answers, right? Suzuki got it right from the first place. They didn't have to change anything. Subaru decided that the correct mix was a mix of both the spaciousness and the adventureness, but not the sportiness, and came up with the XV Crosstrek. And Toyota was forced by the buyers to update it to look more like an SUV based off of the other two, which had succeeded around, guess when? 2011. It's nearly perfect. The dates of how this all worked out are so incredibly close. And that's how we have our three answers. We have the Toyota Corolla Matrix, which was born to just be a Corolla wagon, but ended up becoming more sporty and all-wheel drivey with time. Actually, they became less all-wheel drivey because the all-wheel drive became more rare, but the all-wheel drives are more popular today, so that proves them wrong, that the all-wheel drive was less popular than the front-wheel drive back then. Anyway, we have the Subaru Crosstrek, which is, again, a blend of the space and the utility and the adventurousness. Another thing that kind of discredits the idea that it was a blend of both is that the Subaru Crosstrek, at least the XV Crosstrek, actually had less space in the back than the, regular Subaru Impreza hatchback because of the way that the roof slopes, but you can market anything to seem like it's spacious. And then the Suzuki SX4, which didn't have to change anything since, again, in 2006 they got the formula right? Spacious and can go anywhere. We have our three answers. These are how these three cars tied together. Now you can see how they are essentially representing the death of fun cars, because this is how fun cars were created. Trial and error and trying to make a car, playing the game of what do consumers want, and then ending up on the right answer. Now, just a minute question you may ask is, how did Subaru be the only one to get away with this? I mean, how did Toyota leave and the SX4 be a complete failure? I mean, opposite. How did the Corolla Matrix become a complete failure and Suzuki leave when the SX4 could have saved them? I don't know. Subaru must have all the Thanos stones. It really doesn't make sense why the Crosstrek succeeded and these other two failed. At least not on paper. Now, from a consumer standpoint, Subaru had already built up that relationship with the Outback Sport. The Suzuki was always kind of way in the woods there. I mean, during the crash of 2008, Subaru was in a better place financially than Suzuki was, with a lot of Suzuki's gambles. Remember, they came out with this in 2006. I bet that was a big cash hit for developing this for a few years. The big crash, the big one, happened in 2008, 2 years later. So just bad timing for Suzuki when they came out with this, and Toyota was doing pretty well financially. So that's how Suzuki got killed off, and Subaru was able to stick around even when they were both small Japanese car companies. I actually previously made a video on how Subaru survived and Suzuki didn't. Don't watch it. It's terrible. Now, a lot of you are probably thinking, what's the connection these three cars have to fun cars? Because I've talked about the connection that they have to each other, but now I just made this statement, if we need to bring these back, we need to bring back fun cars. Because these represent moderation. You know the saying, everything is good in moderation? That's what these cars are. They're not too big. They're the right size. They're not too off-roady, but they have high enough ground clearance. They don't look too much like an SUV, but they don't look too much like a hatchback. These cars are the perfect balance between your Toyota Yaris and your Hyundai Santa Fe gigantic globulous SUV, right? These cars were super fun to drive. They were fantastic, and they represent what we need more of in the auto industry: moderation and understanding. So that's the connection between these three cars. Let's move on to the cars themselves, just looking at them if you'd like to purchase them. So yeah, that's the connection. Let's move on. So if you don't really care, you're not looking to purchase any of them, or, you don't really want the facts since you've already heard some of them, it's not going to be repeated. It's going to be fun. We're going to look through the pamphlets and then prices and stuff. Then, you don't have to watch this section. But I like this because it lets me decompress. I've just been editing and talking and photos and animations and all that stuff. It's nice to just have one section of the video that I don't have to edit. So we're going to go car by car. This is the Suzuki SX4 pamphlet. Sorry. There we go. Let's move down, just basic car. I like this blue. I really like the wheels. The reason why I really like the Suzuki SX4 was because I was at a Waffle House when I was like 14 or something. And I can hear the guy, "You're 14 right now." My age would shock you. I don't like talking about my age because everyone just doesn't believe. It doesn't matter. I was at a Waffle House. I saw one of these. There was like two old people and they had two surfboards. I'm like, that car's really fun. And I really wanted it to be my first car for a while, but then I just decided to do the Toyota Prius. And it was hard to find a connection between this and two other cars to like do a video on it. But I'm glad that I did because I love it when I talk about cars and they're in my video section. Love those wheels. And I just like the style of the back because, it's like I own it. It's like a little piece of its history is on my YouTube channel permanently. So I'll never like private any of my videos unless they're truly atrocious. Yeah. All-wheel drive. Back then, the bargain bit doesn't really matter because it's used and it costs a fraction of what it costs to new. But yeah, and it looked exactly like this, man. Those cars are so cool. If you're looking for like a sleeper build or something, they're pretty nice. The only downside is Suzuki's interiors are crap. Unless it's like a Kizashi or some nice car, they're bad. So I would just get it a nicer stereo, rip all this crap off, find some cover, 3D print. Now that we have 3D printing, that'd be great. And I'd probably 3D print a new bottom thing down here. I'm acting like 3D printing is like injection molded. Like, it's not that nice, but it's fine. And then they've also got this, which is basically just, your standard Garmin navigation system, but it's technically New Link. So that's great. The SX4 Sport was what they called the sedan for some reason, which was a little weird. They also had what I talked about in the video, which was the Sportback, which was really designed to be more sporty. The radio looks nice, though, actually. Doesn't look that bad. We've also got the suspension, pretty nice. Nice. I like it from the back. This is the Sportback. It should be German, the Sportbach. Yeah, pretty nice. I mean, it's just meant to be sporty, it's not really that intense. You got the vehicles down here. I like how, man, they were really desperate. This was the year before they went bankrupt, so they had the Equators on there twice, and the Grand Vitara. Sad. I love Suzuki. Here's the options. Here's the colors, the overall stuff, if you really care that much about things and stuff and things. I had to get a car. I definitely want one with the crossover with those wheels because they were pretty nice, and I'd probably get in like red, or they had a lot of reds, but I also like the blue and the gray, but the gray is more for a Prius color. All right, now let's move on to this purchase. I would go like 2008 and newer because they had those wheels. This is like the older wheel technology. I don't really like them. A lot of these also say base and technology. No one knows what they have anymore, Anyway, here are the prices that you can expect to be paying if it's got like several 100,000 miles or nearly that. About 4,000, about 8,000 if it's in really nice condition and has a navigation package. Don't get the one with the technology or the navigation package. What you should do, totally for all of these, call CatSkin. They do leather conversions. I had it done on my Prius. So nice. It came with cloth standard. It was a weird thing that the dealership did for the person who had it because they didn't want the leather. I wanted the leather, so I called CatSkin, and for like $4,000, which is a chunk of change, they replaced my cloth interior and the armrest and everything with leather. So do that. Don't bother with the packages. Just do them all aftermarket if you want a backup camera and stuff. So yeah. Let's move on to the XV Crosstrek. We're getting these down. I also like the wheels of these, like the original wheels. They look very sturdy, they're not very slanty. If you want to hear more about the Crosstrek, I just did an entire video on it. It's called Car of the Week, but because, people like the Crosstrek, and if I just say car of the Week, I'm so used to doing Car of the Week. Car of the Month frees up some slack for me, because they're so used to, just videos about the cars and not anything attached to it. And sometimes I just call it, what it is. This thing's interior was pretty nice, although the radios were crap. They were like Pioneer It says Subaru. It's basically just a glorified SK Hynx. Like, it's not good. The radios were crap. Get the updated Crosstrek without the XV, because the only thing that changed was a nicer radio, and I believe a slightly newer, different steering wheel. Other than that, pretty much the same. Yeah, and again, seriously, it had a different amount of storage space in the back compared to the hatchback because of the roof slope. I always found that fun because it was always like, it's so versatile. Only 2 trim levels, and in terms of customization, I would definitely get the ivory leather. If you're going to get cloth, I would get the black cloth because it held up better than the ivory, even though I think the ivory looks better. And then desert khaki, I'd probably get desert khaki, even though it's more of a brown, really. They're for sale. These are actually still pretty popular considering they're still being sold. The other 2 cars are like in no man's land. So you can expect to pay anywhere from $9,000 to $12,000 for these first gens. But remember, I look into the second generations. They also sold a hybrid. If you want to know more about the hybrid, you know what I'm going to say. Watch that video. Here's the Matrix from 2012. Toyota, sometimes they get it. Like with hybrids, they got that. They understood. They clocked it. They got it. With this, they didn't, and they kept trying to, like, if they had leaned in, I also like how they, like, replaced that badge. Like, they definitely edited that badge. Like, I can see where they have edited it in that little circle there to make it more clear so that the headlight buzz noise doesn't affect the badge. That was nice. Another hilarious thing is, like, in this one Kia photo of the Kia Rio, they photoshopped wheels onto it because the spinning wheels, you couldn't see them, and it looked like a total disaster. Like, it wasn't even the right RPM. It was really bad. Yeah, Toyota, with this, they didn't understand. If they had marketed it as all-wheel drive and versatile, they would have kept selling it until today. Instead of that, they leaned into the sportiness of it, and it's like, man, no one really cares. No one really wants that. You know what I mean? It's like, that's not what people are buying this for. You know, they really did not understand anything about crossovers. It was a nice car, though, from the side, you know, from the front. I really like these little fog lights here. I also really like these wheels. Oh, those wheels are so nice. You know, they're a little bit starfishy, but, you know, it's fine. I also like how the back kind of emulates the front. It's kind of a nice touch. Again, the interior was just bleh. This annoys me so much. They had the opportunity to make the interior better from the original vibe, weird interior that it had with this weird center shifter, and they just didn't. They just created an equally worse interior. Definitely replace that radio, because that thing is old. One of my favorite things, I was going to get a car for one of my relatives, and I drive a 2015 Prius. He was like, I can interest you in a new Prius. I'm like, no, I have plenty of technology in my one. He's like, does that even have CarPlay? CarPlay is not the be-all, end-all of cars, okay? This radio is probably fine if you just want to listen to, like, Benny and the Jets on whatever station you listen to. It's up to you. I like the fog lights, too. Fog lights pretty nice. Again, those wheels, man, those were nice. I also like the sportiness of it, but again, that's a big shield. For, like, already having a shield in the dashboard, that's some big shield. I don't know if I can get behind that. The steering wheel was also weird. Why do they always do this? That's what I like about my Prius. I can put my hand down there in just one hand, and that's fine. I also like how they shoved the clock way down here because they had nowhere else to put it, and they just gave you these 2 little things where plugs would go if you had them. Thanks, Toyota. This doesn't look disjointed at all. I also like that black button in the silver assembly. At least they didn't paint it. And the mirrors over there. Toyota really... I love Toyota, but sometimes they act like the dumbest people on the planet. Like they can't figure it, like they're incompetent. Which sometimes they are. Here's the doors, door panels, everything. They had Corolla stuff. You know, pretty... Again, with the chinny chin chin chin. They did this with the Lexus HS. Yeah, the sedan. Didn't look good there. Doesn't look good here. They also gave it a sunroof. I just wish it had a different interior. The interior is by far the worst part. I mean, it's weird. They got these shapes, like this diamond pattern and the shark fin. I mean... it doesn't affect the functionality. Like, it's still a fine car. Here, these are the hubcaps I'm talking about. They're pretty nice. I wish they had used those other times. Yeah, the L and then the S, back when they were doing this weird naming stuff. At least they're only the L and the S, because they had, like, L Eco, LE Eco, LES, S Plus, L's Premium, L's 15, 19, 24,000. They were doing that with the regular Corolla, and I hated that crap. It's like, can you just figure it out? Get a hold of yourself. They also just called it, just in case you're looking to buy it, just the Toyota Matrix. It wasn't really called the Corolla anymore, even though this one shared more with the Corolla than I'm not going to get into it. And for prices, it's all about the all-wheel drive. I've sampled this to only have all-wheel drive. This is about $7,000 to $14,000, you know, about $6,000 if it's really cheap and like clapped out like this one is. Without the all-wheel drive, that price just like $3,000 for a 2009. People just don't value these things. Anyway, thank you for watching. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and I will see you guys very soon.